Yeah, that's the one you did, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see here.
So what do you do?
Clemson Brown.
We're getting ready to shoot.
Quite a bit of noise last week during the show.
Malcolm debated at the Oxford Union in England.
I read once, passingly, about a man named Shakespeare. I only read about him passingly, but I remember one thing he wrote that kind of moved me. He put it in the mouth of Hamlet, I think it was, who said, "To be or not to be." He was in doubt about something. Whether it was nobler in the mind of man to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, moderation, or to take up arms against the sea of troubles and by opposing, end them. And I go for that. If you take up arms, you'll end it. But if you sit around and wait for the one who's in power to make up his mind that he should end it, you'll be waiting a long time. And in my opinion, the young generation of whites, blacks, browns, whatever else there is, you're living at a time of extremism, a time of revolution, a time when there's got to be a change. People in power have misused it, and now there has to be a change, and a better world has to be built, and the only way it's going to be built is with extreme methods. And I, for one, will join in with anyone, don't care what color you are, as long as you want to change this miserable condition that exists on this earth. Thank you.
Malcolm was always involved somewhere in the struggle.
Welcome to the Gilchrist experience. As you see, as one of my heroes in life, I learned a lot from Malcolm. I was mentored by his bodyguard, Charles Kenyatta. I spent 7 years videotaping him telling me all the stories about Malcolm. And I learned a lot about my history and how we should deal with being black in America. I saw a man change over time. This is, what, 2 months before he died. This is December 1964 in Oxford, England, where he says in the end, "I'll work with anybody. I don't care what color you are." And him, he was quite a, the white man's the devil in his early beginnings. But he learned through communication and meeting different people around the world to change his ways. And this is after he left the nation, and he started on his own. Of course, he was getting too powerful in the world itself, showing how even being a revolutionary, he could revolutionize himself and take all people. And encompasses the spirituality, as Minister Brown. But today we have with us my hero's daughter, Gil Noble's daughter, Lynn Noble. I mean, I'm so tickled that you're here today. I mean, this is family. I just had so much love for Gil. I mean, like I say to you and everybody else, you guys know I wouldn't be sitting here if it wasn't for Gil Noble. I mean, he gave me the gumption to get up and do what I'm doing. So, I mean, I just followed him and wherever he went. I mean, he was all our idols because it was our struggle. He taught us about how to be men. In those days, Clemson is old enough to remember all this. He's a little older than I. I'm 76, Clemson's 78.
Wow.
So we were just a few years younger than Gil.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's the way it was back in those days. Clemson and I were talking about, we didn't grab guns back in those days. We were boxers. We were gentlemen. And like Gil explains to us all how you had to look on, you had to deal with, I forgot how he put it, but he said you had to handle, well, he was afraid of Malcolm. Malcolm was too up front. We didn't talk about white people like that. And he said that we had to work our way around bad.
Yes.
Or, just, we knew it was wrong, but we had to be, teach them how to be human. Because racism, if you really get down to it, it's kind of stupid.
Very
Not
stupid.
kind of, it's very stupid.
Very
you know.
stupid.
Malcolm even saw that in his last days. I'll work with anybody, no matter what color you are. Now, this is the temperament that we have today. We have to look past Trump and his nonsense. I mean, it's hard. It's a lesson from God. You saw we had Obama to me was a blessing from God. Half white, half black,
I agree.
raised in Hawaii.
Of all states.
Went to Hawaii.
Yeah.
Only thing, Winston, unless we watching Star Trek, no such thing as half white, half black. I mean, Obama was a brother all until he became president. Then this interjection. We got a lot of people of mixed race background. They still considered African American.
Okay. I'm just saying. I'm just saying, according to well, his mother was white,
Right,
his father was African. I mean, you can get any blacker than that. I mean, how many of us have a direct African ancestor as a father? All of us are mixed up somehow, but this man was a son of Africa.
Yes.
And yet he caught a lot of flack from black people.
Early on in his presidency, a lot of people spoke out against him.
Exactly. And then
But
after.
when you're the president, you're going to catch flack. That's part of that. Goes with the territory. Exactly, goes with the territory. You got a lot of constituents that not going to see eye to eye with you. So.
And we talk about your father.
Yeah.
Elombe Brath.
Yep.
Now, there's a little
well,
feisty.
he was feisty, you know, and I tell you a story. You know, Lynn speaks about how she experienced her dad different than other people. You know, I'm still experiencing my dad, you know, as being the president of the Elombe Brath Foundation. I uncover certain things in the archival material, whether it's writings, books, etc. They give me another different side of him. Although, you know, I've traveled to some countries with him and you know, been places with him and seen him at work. You know, some things, some aspects of his personality, the way others experienced him, I haven't experienced them that. I'll give you an example. You know, so currently at the Schomburg, there's a Black Power 50 exhibit that is playing there. I think it's there until November. It's got a few more weeks there. So it just so happens that our Vice President, Robert Gumbs, was meeting with Eldridge Cleaver, former minister of the Black Panthers' wife, Kathleen Cleaver. And so Kathleen Cleaver, Bob Gumbs, and another former Panther, Cyril Innes, who we call affectionately Bullwhip, met at the Schomburg. And at the Schomburg, Kathleen Cleaver was going through, and she said, wow, look, a young Elombe. She was like, he was such a fiery personality. But for me, I didn't really, even when all his forums in Harriet Tubman, I didn't really consider him fiery. But she's experiencing him at a different time. So then I come across a 1972 film called Breaking the Chains of Oppression, in which he's speaking in front of like 60,000 people in Washington, D.C. And he was fiery. He had just come back from visiting with Sekou Touré in Guinea, and he was fiery in front of his voice, his style. I was like, who's that dude?
You said.
Yeah, I was like, you know, I'm not used to seeing him in his speech like that. I'm used to seeing him more of a, matter of fact, sort of like, not as fiery, scholarly, but not as fiery and not as, you know, charged up. But of course, he's much younger. You know, this is 1972.
What about this Roland you just sent to me?
That's that role.
That's the one?
That's the role, yeah. And when he's fiery.
You want to take a look at
Let's
that?
take a look at it now, yeah.
All right, this one, Elombe Brath. This is what year?
1972. It's African
72.
Liberation Day
72.
in Washington, D.C. The fieriness of him, the hand motions and all that, you know. I wasn't used to him being so charged up.
He was a revolutionary.
Yeah.
Okay. Bev? Give me a full shot. All right, we're having technical problems.
Yeah.
But we'll come back to it. Tell me when you got it ready, okay? All right. So, well, after the roll-in, tell us a little bit more about.
Well,
Tell us about
you know what?
Elombe and Gil working together.
Wow,
That's
it's
what I
so
wanna
funny
hear about.
because they worked together for many years.
How many years was that? 20?
20.
Maybe more.
Maybe a little bit
There's
more
more
than
than
that.
it's more than 20.
Yeah, it's
I'm
gotta be
just
more
talking,
than 20, about
because
30
Was he
years,
that
Yeah.
maybe, yeah.
30
yeah.
years?
But what
Out of the
happened?
40 years he was there, Elombe was there?
Yeah, but you know what?
Yeah.
They separated them, and there's a story about that Bernard writes in the foreword of the upcoming book. We have a book on some of my father's writings that the Elombe Brath Foundation is putting out. It's going to be compiled by Harlem's renowned author Herb Boyd. And, and the foreword of the book, Bernard White, former general manager of
Yeah, good man, Bernard
WBI
White.
station,
Oh,
he talks
wow.
about the experience. He said that he was there in the instance in which was the day in which outside forces decided they had to separate Gil and Elombe.
All right, we'll come back
Okay,
after the
thank you.
rolling.
November 1970, Portugal invaded the Republic of Guinea, an independent nation in West Africa. The invasion was repelled. Cecil Braithwaite, who recently returned from the Republic of Guinea, spoke about the significance of African Liberation Day and the meaning of a popular revolutionary slogan among the masses of African people.
If we had brought 10 to you here today for Africa, it would have been historic. Because black people were not looking for Africa before. Negro comedians making jokes about they had lost something in Africa. And they want to stay here because they want their Cadillac. What is a Cadillac made out of? Is it made out of steel? Steel comes from iron? Iron comes from Africa? It has rubber? Rubber comes from Africa? It has copper? Copper comes from Africa? Everything in the Cadillac came from Africa. To see all these black people, all these African people, is one of the greatest moments in all of our lives. I only hope that everybody here realizes what it means, and that we work from today to understand that every day is African Liberation Day. It cannot be a thing like Brotherhood Week. Understand that every day is African Liberation Day. In Guinea, I'll leave you with this. They say imperialisme, abaf, meaning down with imperialism. They say colonialisme, abaf, meaning down with colonialism. They say neocolonialism, abaf, meaning down with neocolonialism. So I'll leave you with this. When I say imperialism, just give me a good abaf. When I say colonialism, the same thing as neocolonialism. Imperialism. Colonialism. Neocolonialism.
Liberation struggles on the continent.
Yeah.
That's interesting. 1972.
Yep, Washington, D.C., African
You know what it's
Liberation
like to be
Day.
black in those days?
I
We
read
had
it.
no clue. I mean, well, very few except for Clemson Brown. I mean, he's always been aware. You're an African scholar, right? Come on,
What
Clemson.
I did was took my camera and I tried to, and you know, you see I'm really quiet, I'm humble.
Well, we knew it was coming.
So, and for that reason, I was able really to go in and out of all the different groups because I didn't try to, project myself as anything other than the person who documents the history.
Yeah.
So I was pretty much the official documentarian for the movement. And for every group, they accepted me. So I ended up with one of the largest archives. There were 3 great archives. There was listed at Milton in South Carolina. There was Gil Noble. Gil was first, Listerville second, and then there was Transatlantic Productions, my archives. So these 3 archives, today it would be Gilchrist would have to throw it.
I'm very following.
So these 3 archives was more or less documented our movement, what we said, what we did, what we were about. And that's what the 31,000 hours of footage that I have. And I had the opportunity of working with Gil. I did a lot of community stuff, whether it was the death of Yusef Hawkins, all that kind of stuff, were community activity. I used to take that footage and give it to Gil, and Gil would play it. We did quite a number of things together. The 87 ASCAT conference in Africa, Egypt, which over 1,000 blacks went, African Americans went to Egypt to study and learn their history. And Gil was there, so Gil and I teamed up.
Was that with Dr. Ben or Dr. Clark?
Well, both of them was there. It was ASCAT.
Both of them were there?
Yeah, they both was there.
Wow.
And so those 3.
You have footage on that?
I did the 3 programs.
Clark, Ben, and Gil together?
Yeah, yeah, of course.
Oh, I want to see that.
All together.
That would be interesting.
So it has been, you know, like people said that Koch was such a great mayor, and he loved and respected everybody. Black community hated
Ed Koch.
Ed Koch. And I have all the footage to prove it, because all the demonstrations, everything, the closing of hospitals, citing him, I don't care what it is in this community.
The welfare hotels.
I filmed it, and I have that footage within those 31,000 hours. And one of the most important things is that our history is our memory. And if you can't remember what you did yesterday, you can't do it today. Memory is so critical for shaping our consciousness and our being. And our young people do not have a memory of their ancestors, what they did, what they accomplished. And in actuality, our ancestors, African ancestors, all of world history is nothing but an African story. It is the story of African people, the Creator bringing them to being on the continent of Africa. And it's that African people, that African mother and father, that brings about the blood of humanity. And they travel all over the world. So world history is the story of African people moving, experiencing, gathering information and knowledge, from the ability to speak to the ability to build pyramids and temples. Even the speech is an African it's an African gift. Speech itself is an African gift. All human knowledge comes out of the African mind, you know, and so that is what our children need to know. They need to know the history. And Gil, I hope I can just show, I can just lift this piece. Oh, shit. This is heavy.
Oh, wow.
And show it, because I'm an artist. In college, I majored in fine arts and African history. Let me see, I'm trying.
No, it's good. It's good.
I want to make sure our folk can see this. And the reason why I did these pieces are to show that we are the builders of the pyramids. We're the builders of everything in terms of laying the foundation, whether it is science, technology, mathematics, I don't care what it is. It all came out of the African mind, because Europeans only evolved out of the Caucasus Mountains, what, 10,000 years ago or so? Everything was already built and made and, you know, functioning.
Famous saying that,
and basically what they did was to destroy. We lived in a spiritual world. There's a difference between spirituality and religion.
Right.
And we really need that right now. We need to know the difference. Because right now, without
we got the
African
devil in the
knowledge,
White House.
without African knowledge,
sure.
you open up talking about this. This is what we were talking about.
Yeah.
And every nation is armed to the teeth and got its finger on the trigger. And any little mistake can actually end humanity as we know it. The one thing that unites us is African history, African people. We're the mothers and fathers of humanity. So when you understand that we are all really brothers and sisters, that's what you're saying here.
Right.
We're all the same. There's no new blood.
That's
The
right.
blood that runs in your vein is the same blood that the Creator brought forth in the first African and spreaded it.
The first African was Lucy.
Well, it was Lucy.
Lucy, the first human.
The Africans call her Degnish. And she's,
really?
well, yeah.
She's
you know,
called-
one of the
okay.
things I've had the pleasure of doing is traveling all over the world with our greatest historians, like Dr. Clark, Dr. Ben.
That's right.
I don't care, Ivan Van Sertima, Dr. Jeffries.
right.
I don't know, you know, and so we've traveled to all these places, and we have studied. So the work is scientific, well documented, and this is what our children have to understand.
Amen.
That
Amen.
they have a responsibility to make the world a better place and to teach that spirituality to humanity. That's what we all need to come to understand. That we are brothers and sisters out of one blood, out of one family. And so, you know, once you understand our common bond and our common relationship, it's hard to just kill your brother. Because you know, it's, I'm going to say this, but it's religion that separates, divides, and slaughter us as a people. Religion and of course politics and so forth. But spirituality goes beyond religion, because religion pulls you out of yourself and gives you another human being as the way back to understanding the oneness of creation, that you are. You're one with the trees, you're one with the plants, you're one with the river. We are, and that's the African traditional understanding and concept. Everything is everything. And so you have to respect everything. You have to respect one another. So that's a lesson that Donald Trump has
teaching
no
us.
idea.
No, he's teaching us because, you know, I always relate to, you know, God's a woman. And to me, I mean, to me, God's a woman. I mean, we're also, God is love. The love unto you create life. Life comes from you, from your womb. Men spend the rest of their lives trying to get back into the womb.
Exactly.
I'm not going to argue.
Oh my God.
From creation to procreation. You know?
Please don't go the other way.
But it's funny because women abuse, a race declines when they misuse and abuse their women. Because they're the human gods. And I always looked at that. My mother's an angel sitting right here, and she's been dead since 1963. But I can talk to any time I decide to. You know?
That's true.
That's my creator. And that's God to me right there. She created me. And I treat women like that. I love women. I mean, they're just the joy of my life. I mean, they say if you keep your wife happy, come on, speak up, Bev.
Happy wife, happy life.
I was about to say, just let me give a shout out to Viola, to Lady. I've been married to her for 57 years. So everything.
How is she doing?
She's doing fine.
Good.
And the reason why we've lasted 57 years, when we first got married, we went to Mexico. And there was an island, but you had to swim through this underground cave to get to this island. So we wanted to go out on this island, but it was about 15 feet deep. And Viola couldn't swim.
Oh, wow.
But she wanted to go out on the island. So I jumped in and I said, okay, babe, jump in, I got you. And to my surprise, she jumped. So I said to myself, once we got, you know, hooked up and I'm paddling through the tunnel, I hadn't got to the other side. I said to myself, boy, this woman really loves you. She really trusts you. Because she can't swim at all. And she just holding on and believing that you're going to get her through.
Right.
So 57 years later, we're
still holding on.
We're still
That's
holding
a
on.
good way
Thank
to
you.
describe it.
You know, I want to go back to Gil.
Yes.
I'm going to play a piece by Gil I think you'll appreciate.
Wonderful.
This
Thank
is
you.
Gil Noble talking about Malcolm. And this, good people, is this man molded my mind and helped me understand how I felt. Because I grew up in that era where, you know, Malcolm was a threat to all of us. I mean, stop eating pork. But we didn't learn about Malcolm till after Malcolm was dead. And this is what happens many a day. I mean, we didn't know Martin till Martin died. But I was raised in that movement. It was wonderful. I was in the Corps when most of this stuff was going 60 to 64. People were sitting on the counters and being slapped upside the head. And I couldn't have gone through that. I don't know how they possibly did that. I thought, wow.
Repeatedly, they
How
did
could you
that.
do
Yeah.
that? How you could sit there? And I was from New York. I'm the same age as Emmett Till.
Right.
So when he was 14, I was in, that was Money, Mississippi. I'm up here in New York going to a half-white, half-black school, George Washington High School, up in 192nd Street in Audubon Avenue. But Malcolm in the 60s was scary. And plus they were talking about stop eating pork. And I love ribs. I mean, we had Sherman's barbecue, man. You could, the meat fell off the bones in those days. I mean, that was good eating. So, and a different religion. We went over this last week with Hafiz Muhammad, head of
Mosque number 7.
Right, Mosque number 7. So let's play Gil, and he more or less explains our manhood, or how we learned about Malcolm.
The media's coverage
It was
of
awful.
Malcolm
It
versus
was awful.
the real deal.
It was awful. And so I learned about Malcolm, and I realized that I had been had. I realized that
You
I
had
had
bought
missed.
what the media had told you.
Yes, I bought it, hook, line, and sinker. But when I heard Malcolm's entire presentation, everything fell in line, and it was logical. And it made me understand that there's no sin in being angry. In fact, if you're not angry, there's something wrong with you.
And why do you think Malcolm was killed?
I think there's
real issues.
I think that there are a number of reasons why he was killed. And it's a very, very painful reality that we need to deal with. He was a threat to America's global ambitions. He had done a lot in Africa to awaken the African countries and let them understand that they should not be a victim of the courtship that American businesses were engaged in, the Peace Corps and all these things, because they don't love you. They want your minerals. If they did, look what they're doing to us, and we're your brothers and sisters. Look what they're doing to us in, Mississippi and whatnot. And so many of them began to quote Malcolm on the floor of the United Nations, ironically. So I think that that's one dimension that the State Department, and they tried to kill him when he was in Egypt. They poisoned him, but he had his stomach pumped and he survived. So that was one dimension. Then there were the authorities here in this country that also wanted him to leave this life. And then there was a lot of factionalism within the Nation of Islam. And there was a lot of greed, there was a lot of ambitiousness, and there was a lot of friction, because the Nation of Islam had grown into an economic colossus.
And self-sufficiency.
They were self-sufficient.
The same things that your parents practiced.
Exactly. And they were a threat. They had their own schools. They had their own religion.
Food.
They had their own name, their own diet. They were self-sufficient. And that was a threat.
Big time.
And so I think that there are some people who were in the nation who, see, many of the people who had been fished by Malcolm into joining the nation had been on the street like he had. And a lot of them, as the money started to come in, some of the old temptations began to take over. I interviewed a man, Talmadge Hayer, in prison, and he told me that he thought that Malcolm was a hypocrite and that he was wrong in bad-mouthing Elijah. He told me this on camera. And he told me how they went about assassinating him and, you know, how determined they were to take him out.
He really believed it, you think?
Oh, he really did. He thought, and the more Malcolm protested, the angrier they became. And so he took me right through. He was one of the gunmen. He had a pistol, and he described how there were 3 gunmen. 1 had a rifle and 2 had pistols. He was one of the gunmen. The rifle went off first and struck down Malcolm, and the 2 men with revolvers went up to the stage and emptied their revolvers. And he told me that he was convinced that he had done the right thing, you know. And I asked him, I said, in your life, have you ever so much as spat at a member of the White Citizens Council or the Ku Klux Klan? Or did you ever smack one? And he dropped his head and he said, no.
Did he understand the meaning of that question, do you think?
I made it clear. But he said that it wasn't until years later, while in prison, that he came to understand that Malcolm was not lying, he was not wrong, and that there was corruption. And he had a nervous breakdown in prison because he realized that who he had taken off.
Yes, exactly.
You know, so I mean, this was just a very, very painful experience, and it's something that we are not yet wrestling with. I don't want to get overly philosophical, but I just wanted to respond to your question that Malcolm had a tremendous impact on me after he was dead.
Afterwards.
Yes, because after that I became hungry to get this story and learn more about this extraordinary man. Alex Haley just came out with the book soon after the assassination. Got to know Alex, became very good friends, and I got to know Betty and the whole family, all of Israel. And so I began to fill out this cavity. I had this rich nourishment from Martin, but the cavity that my ignorance had created with Malcolm was beginning to be filled in. And then even more significant, I think, were the role that the students played.
Yes.
Because I think that that's something that today's students don't really understand.
True.
That was
You know, I've seen that several times, and I get more out of it every time I see it. I realize that he speaks for all of us. I mean, I got to know Malcolm through Charles Kenyatta, and then, you know, seeing Gil and knowing Gil's work, I became really involved with, you know, us as a people. And I didn't realize, you know, I was sitting at Dr. Clark's funeral. Gil Noble sat right next to me. And I'm sitting there and I'm videotaping Clark's funeral. And the only reason I got in there, I was able to shoot, is because they thought I was with Gil. So Gil said he's all right, because he was coming on my show the following week.
Wow.
So that's the only way I got to shoot Dr. Clark's funeral, because Gil Noble let me sit next to him.
I remember that time when my father was getting to know Alex Haley, and he took us to see him speak. I believe it was in South Orange, and I remember my mom forcing us to go up there and get an autograph from him. We were really young then, and like most children, we protested. It was very long. He spoke for a very long period of time, at least for us. It must have been 3 hours, but he spoke about how he felt when he went to Africa and how he felt when he was standing among the people there and how he felt his Africanism. Of course, this was before Roots. You know,
Right, okay.
and so of course he became a really big star. But I remember that very clearly, and I remember his friendship with Betty Shabazz and the members of his family, and how all of that shaped him, along with his friendship with your father. That played a big part of his life. He was really the sum of many parts, and he was open to it, and I think that's led to his success. I think he just wasn't just a broadcaster for ABC television, which he was very good at. But I think he allowed himself, when they gave him that show, Like It Is, it gave him a platform for him to do what he did, what he became well known from. I mean, at first, initially, it was him being on the evening news, 6 o'clock news, 11 o'clock news.
Yeah.
Then Like It Is came about with Geraldo Rivera and several other people he had co-hosts. But I think that gave him a platform to express himself.
Yeah.
So
So
led
you
to a
learned
successful-
history directly from your dad.
Directly from my father.
And
yeah.
he taught us all.
He did. It was wonderful.
Because it was his own experience. This is so great about it.
It was very touching to see that video. I just hadn't, seen him like that in a while. So it was very, very nice. The same expressions and mannerisms, and
So in the house, he was a regular guy.
He was a
Did
lot
you get
like that.
spankings?
No, I didn't at all. I think maybe one. But he really was very, 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 very busy. And I think most people who are successful like that,
Right.
whether it be in media or whatever you do, his father, they're just hardly ever there, And on top of that, he was teaching a class at Seton Hall once a week as well, too. So he would do the news and do his program and teach. So he really was around a little bit on the weekends at times. And then he would go into the city, and there were lots of things happening. And he was pulled in many different directions. So but he was present. We didn't live too far outside the city, so we saw a lot of him, and he definitely was around. But
And you had five.
you're right,
Five of
4
you.
girls and 1 boy. So,
4 girls,
yeah.
1 boy.
So it was nice. It was a very normal life. He was an extraordinary person, but our lives were pretty normal. We knew what he did and who he was and what his job was. And he would sometimes take us to see him do the news. I saw him do the news several times for ABC television. And sometimes we would be in the audience when he did his show, Like It Is, and he would bring us on. We've been to the studio many times, so we had. But I think we just thought it was normal because that's what he always did. He was always in the media, so the media was normal. It was no different than, I think, someone being a banker or whatever. It was an extraordinary life, but I think most children, when they're inside, when they grow up, they just think of him as a father.
Of course.
And then, as usual, when you get older and time passes, and you realize, the magnitude of what he accomplished and what he did.
Tell us about the piano.
He was a great piano player. He started out in Manhattan with the Gil Noble Trio.
Gil Noble Trio.
And he played jazz. He taught me initially how to play before he gave lessons. So he said that we always had a piano in the house, even when they had the apartment in New York. And so he played all the time, and that was relaxing for him. But he was really, to me, a Renaissance type of a gentleman. I mean, he was a great artist and a great painter and a great sculptor.
He painted too?
Yeah, and he and then played music, and he really included us a lot in his the artist side of him. So, and it was relaxing for him. It wasn't a chore. It was a way. Some people, I don't know, jog and do things like that.
Yeah.
He would paint, and he would paint people like Charlie Parker and listen to jazz all the time.
Yeah. That was one of Gil and Elombe's connections, was art and jazz, because Elombe's first thing, my father, he founded AJazz, African Jazz Art Society Studio, and he knew that, of course, him and Gil would talk about jazz all of the time. And, of course, my father, being the creative person he was, he went to a visual arts school, When he first came on, outside of being a consultant for Like It Is, he's listed as graphic artist, So his whole background is in the creative, in the arts. In fact, a little different is that my father's relationship with Malcolm began differently because he came from African nationalist pioneer movement background with Carlos Cooks.
What was the age difference between Elombe and Gil?
Gil's about 4 or 5 years older than my father,
Yeah,
I think.
definitely.
Is that all?
Yeah.
They were very tight, though.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very, very tight. Almost like brothers.
Yeah.
So the, the AMPM, which came under Garvey's teachings of Pan-Africanism. Another thing about Gil and Elombe, that outside of the arts, the jazz, they both had come from the West Indies, quote-unquote West Indies, Jamaica and Barbados, respectively. So there was a lot,
Gil was from
Jamaica.
And your father's from Barbados.
Yeah.
He was actually born here, but his parents
They were
were
both
Jamaican.
born here. Right, they were both born here, but that
And
first
my mom
generation.
is Jamaican, was born in Jamaica.
Okay.
Yeah, that first generation. In fact, well, I'll come back to that part of the story. But, in those days, they were sort of competing. And my father had created, really, a comic called Color Us Colored. And it took shots. It was a cartoon. It was a cartoon book that he had created. And all of the leadership of that time were included in it. He did a satire of all of the people, Malcolm, Adam, everybody was in the satire. And when Malcolm saw Color Us Colored, he's like, I want to meet this guy, So, basically, he was poking at Malcolm in his basically what I call a seminal work. It's like it was a coloring book also, that Ajaz had put out at that time. So that began Malcolm saying, okay, I want to meet this guy. Malcolm had a good sense of humor,
Yeah.
Malcolm thought it was funny, But one of the things about Malcolm and my father, again, my father, the way it goes is Marcus Garvey, Carlos Cooks, Elombe, Brath. The way that it passed down in terms of Pan-Africanism and their schools of thought. And, Clemson knows how everybody would be out on the soapbox on 125th Street speaking on the corner, etc. Because at one point, Malcolm had come over to Carlos Cooks. He was impressed with Carlos Cooks. And I forget exactly how the story goes, but he was, Malcolm asked Carlos Cooks, like, we need to hook up, I want to talk to you. And Carlos Cooks said to Malcolm, get a program. Basically telling him, like, y'all don't have this sort of structured program that I'm looking for, basically, when you get that. So some people, how dare you? This is Malcolm coming to you,
Yeah.
But, so it was a sort of different, different schools. Malcolm started to become more of a really black nationalist later on. In his life. But, my father, one of the things about Elombe was that he was different in his exposure to Malcolm because he had already come here, or he had been really studying systems since he was young. His first cousin was Clennell Wickham. Clennell Wickham was the editor of the Guardian newspaper in Barbados.
Ooh, okay.
And he was writing some fiery stuff saying, listen, this can't happen.
What year are we talking? What year are we talking?
Oh, man. I'd have to Google. This is my father's first cousin, my grandmother's. So they used to talk about Clennell all the time over breakfast. They used to have all these family discussions over the things he had written. In fact, at that time, because Barbados is a conservative island, much more conservative than Jamaica. Jamaica,
still today.
But even today, exactly.
Yeah.
Barbados, they exiled Clennell Wickham. He died in Grenada. People Google him all the time, But that was my father's first cousin, and he really started talking about things, exposed to things like socialism, all of these class, race, all of these things very early on. So even when some people had problems with people like Fidel Castro, my father was like, no, this guy's, let's talk to this guy, He was never really one who had put up any barriers to these different people because very early on, he had been exposed through the stories of his first cousin, Clennell Wickham. And what happened to him in Barbados when he was trying, as the editor, he was warning the people, no, this is our labor, we own this island, we own these sugar canes, these plantations, we got to rise up, this is ours, no, and in that sort of society, you're not going to, especially as the editor, you can't keep that up because you are stirring the masses, you're wakening people up, and they're like, uh-oh.
Well, that's where the Will events theory started.
Right.
Wasn't it, Puppy?
Exactly.
No, well, I mean,
Which
when
one
we
of the
say
islands
Willie Lynch actually
was it
It just
Jamaica?
was more so a concept, but the actual person Willie Lynch that we know never actually. He's not a real
Somebody
person.
else said that.
Yeah.
Wasn't there really
Yeah.
there was a plantation owner that went to Barbados, to one of the islands, and told
but
the
that-
plantation
Right,
owners.
but no, but the actual person Willie Lynch, if we look
Somebody else
back,
said that.
the
Willie
historical-
Lynch never existed?
Yeah,
The
Willie Lynch never
concept
is real.
that he lay out is real. That's what happened.
But that's
can't-
it's not a real person?
No.
I don't know if it's a real person. It's
I thought it
written
was a
up
plant-
as if it's a real
It was a
person.
planter that went
but,
to one of
but
the
the
islands.
concept is the actuality of what Europeans, what white plantations owners did to our people.
Well, they're still
to
doing it
break
today.
them and to keep them in control.
Crack
and so
was,
forth. And yeah, and to some degree today.
They're definitely
It's
doing
done
it today.
through the
Divide and
educational
conquer.
system and through every other way. I mean,
Through
male,
crack
black
and the
male,
planned
black
genocide.
female, that's separation
Yeah.
that you see on television now all
And that's
the
what
time.
Trump
It's,
is doing. Come
it's
on,
not
we got,
just Trump, it's the system.
Well, Trump is
This
head of the
Trump is the
system.
system.
is put in
Is
place
Trump
to
Illuminati
maintain
or what?
white
Is he Illuminati?
supremacy. I don't know whether he's. I know he's a racist.
Well, white supremacy leads of white
All-
supremacy are Illuminati.
So he's all that.
Okay.
And more. But the principles and the techniques were definitely
real.
applied.
Yeah, no
on
doubt
the
about
slave
that. But the
plantation.
person himself is a fictional character. I think a lot of what happened with Willie Lynch, how he got into the mainstream of our thought, is because there was the movie with Denzel Washington, where they were the chess players, and he talked about Willie Lynch. But they're two good historians. Dr. Jelani Cobb, he teaches at University of Connecticut, used to be on the TV all the time with the show. And there's another brother, I can't think of his name right now. They both did historical analysis, and there was no actual person, but the concept.
How come you haven't mentioned Dr. Clark?
Oh, Dr. Clark, he didn't talk about Willie Lynch, but Dr. Clark was one of my favorite people as a kid. I remember I escorted Dr. Ben to Dr. Clark's funeral, the one you guys just talked about, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, my father had me escort Dr. Ben to Dr. Clark's funeral.
Yeah, that was my man, Dr. Ben.
I remember that.
I spent a lot of time with
wonderful.
Dr. Ben.
Yeah.
One of my favorite people.
And it's, you're speaking of Dr. Ben, back to there, so we just coming off the street co-naming for my father on 125th Street. There are plans right directly across the street, that Meridian piece, to name that after Dr. Ben that are going on. So
It's good. Yeah.
Tell us about your lectures coming up on Dr. Clark.
Yeah, the Dr. Clark, Dr. Ben lecture series. We started it over a year ago at Mount Pisgah Baptist Church. And we did.
Where was it?
Mount Pisgah Baptist
Pisgah.
Church in Brooklyn.
In
And we did that series. That was just a 6-week series as a pilot. Went over very well. So now we're starting again this Saturday from 3 to 6. The Communiversity, the Dr. Clark, Dr. Ben lecture series will reopen at Marion Hall. That's 139 Chauncey Street in Brooklyn, between Malcolm X and Patchen. For information, you can call me at 347-773-8203.
We would have put that right on your, why didn't you tell me that before? We could have put it right underneath your name there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Let me give it again.
You were part of pre-production there. And you were videographer, documentation. We didn't take your number down. That's my neglect. I should have asked him for his number.
347-773-8203. And we're giving
And these
away,
classes are free.
These classes are free. We're giving away 150 hours of African history.
Wow.
It's unbelievable. But people ask me, what are you going to do with these 31,000 hours? Well, we're going to give it to the people.
Okay.
That they can be educated, and every home should have this 150. It's called the Black Key, and it goes in the head of this brother. It goes right in the head, the Black Key. We'll fill his head up with all the history that is
Clemson, that bust, is it of actual historical figure like Ramses Imhotep or somebody?
No, it comes out of my head.
Okay.
I'm an artist. I'm an artist. I make these. These are all handmade. And
it's supposed to be.
These are all handmade. I make them myself, and it takes me a couple weeks to do one.
Really?
But just call 347-773-8203.
347-773-8203.
Hey, thank you, bro.
Hey, we got it up there.
Yeah. And the lecture series starts Saturday. Professor Kaba Hiawatha is speaking on West African civilization.
Oh, yeah, he's good.
And how African Americans and all of us brought from West Africa to the Americas are literally direct descendants of ancient Egypt. So he'll be getting to all of that.
Have you seen Hidden Colors? Any of this Hidden Colors series?
I've seen the series.
We have to bring that back. That's another good series.
It really is.
Hidden Colors. Have you seen Hidden Colors?
Yeah, sure.
He's in all of those, isn't he? The teacher.
Yes. Kaba Hiawatha.
You said he appears in all of the series, the Hidden Colors.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And he'll be the speaker this Saturday, 3 to 6, 139 Chauncey Street, Brooklyn, New York, between Stuyvesant and Malcolm X.
But you can call him at this number. Put his number up again. 347-773-8203.
Yeah, thank you.
Clemson Brown, Tapp Video.
So, Brother Clemson Brown said you have the third largest archives now? Do we know who? I mean, we mentioned.
Oh, you know what I like to do? There has to be some sort of collaboration done here between the three of you.
Sure.
And, you know, we'll put it all on the Gilchrist experience. I mean, this is wonderful. I mean, this is...
Actually, Gil and I talked about that before
Really?
he passed, because I had all the community stuff, you know, he had all the in-studio stuff.
Yeah, we talked about it when he came here.
And we discussed how we would do that years ago, but you know how you talk and you talk, but you never really...
Yeah, we've talked about this how long? How many years we've been talking about it?
Yeah, that's true.
But one thing, you know, you guys mentioned about having such a massive archiving for so long. What medium is it on? Is it transferable so we can get young people?
We're technicians. We can put it on anything.
Well, I'm doing the same thing y'all are doing. I'm digitizing.
Digitizing it,
31,000 hours, so when you call, I'll tell you how to help. It's expensive.
Well, we can do it ourselves, because you come to me. Listen, there are ways to do it. You buy the equipment and do it yourself. Okay?
Okay.
Or whatever format it's on. We have transferable. I got all the equipment anyway. I got tons of equipment.
It's good to know.
I've been here 20 years, you know? And this is a hobby. I was following Gil's lead. That's how I got here.
Can I just say I really appreciate you so much. And Elombe, son, Cinque, I just appreciate the children.
Thank you.
Because y'all are presenting
wonderful to hear.
in such a wonderful way.
Thank you
and,
very much.
You know, we done got old. I'm almost 80 now, so it's good to look back and see that y'all are coming along, and you know, the future is secure. So I appreciate you, and I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
He's speaking for both of us. You know?
Well, while we're in the business of thanking, I'd like to thank, you know, the Amsterdam 2 weeks ago. They did a great spread on the street co-naming. They have this story, Elombe Brath showing us the way, and they've got all these great pictures on these 2 pages here.
Oh, wow.
That really took places big. Here we see Dinkins. Perkins, my uncle, Camille Yarbo, Charles Perry, my mom. All of these people who, you know, took part in the...
Thank you, Amsterdam News.
Nice 3 pages. It's really nice.
Sorry. What was
I'd like to thank them for such...
Oh, you know, I got one more clip of Elombe Brath talking about...
Mumia?
Mumia. Talking about Elombe Brath. Just play that 1 minute, please. It's all a still, and he talks about your father's humor.
Yeah.
He was a funny guy.
Yeah. I mean, I always saw him so serious all the time.
Me too.
He was
always
every time I saw him, he was angry.
with the book in his hand, in his arm.
It is an honor to spend this time with you, to tell all of you within earshot of my admiration and indeed my affection for Elombe Brath. We met several months ago after many letters and conversations through our common friends, and we spent several hours, surprisingly, in laughter, talking about the ridiculous, the sublime, the historic, some serious conversations dating from his life and his love of Malcolm. But mostly it really was hours of laughter. The ridiculous in terms of the war, the political situation, and also the serious, the situation that black folks faced, not just in Harlem, not just in New York, not just in the United States, but all around the world. He is a man who should be honored on his 70th birthday, and his 75th, and his 80th, and his 85th, and beyond, because he has remembered us for so many years in struggle on behalf of freedom for all humanity. To Elombe, to all of you, I thank you for this opportunity. On the move, long live John Africa. From death row, this is Mumia Abu Jamal. And I, definitely want to forget the brother, because he was fun. I've read about the brother and heard about the brother, like I said, but, to see this little guy and to kick it with him, he has a hell of a sense of humor. You don't see that in guys his age a lot. He is funny. It was a joy just being in his presence.
Me like that, being
I
on
know.
death row.
Yeah.
He's so jubilant, happy and everything, Exactly.
That's why I played it. I thought that was interesting, right?
And
So,
and
in all the
brother-
struggles, we find humor. So I've always said that's what keeps me alive. I laugh a lot.
Oh, yeah. My father had a great sense of humor.
I think that energy, so even, the most trying situation, such as we're going through now, it takes, we have to take a light-hearted look at this racist and teach him, we have to teach racism, or we have to teach racists how to be human. We have to bring on that spirituality that we need, that we all share, through finding out where our truth is.
Yes.
Finding it's in humor and love energy. Like I say on this, at the end of the program, I say, the God in me loves the God in you. And this is it. This is what we have to transfer. That's our spirituality. Somebody asked me if I was a minister. I said, I minister to my people every Wednesday. And I do it with joy and love energy. And this today has been a love energy fest for me, man. You my people.
Yes,
I got my people here today.
Absolutely.
All my folks, man.
It's a pleasure.
We have to do this again and again.
We're happy to.
All right?
Yes.
Oh, and to Gil and Elombe, and especially my brother. Oh, God, peace go with you. And the God in me loves the God in you. And thank you for coming to the Gilchrist experience.
Thank you.
Power to the people. God bless.
God bless.